1. The move to Blackwood Hollow. It started with a house. Isn't that how most stories like this begin? James and Lisa Turner were exhausted from city life. After years of traffic, rent hikes, and endless noise, they decided to move somewhere quieter, somewhere slower. When they found an old farmhouse deep in Blackwood Hollow, it felt like fate. The property was huge. Acres of forest, creek running through the back, and a house that, though worn by time, had a rustic charm. The price was suspiciously low, but the seller, a nervous man who barely made eye contact, was eager to close the deal. "You'll love it here," he muttered, handing them the keys. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Just make sure you're inside after dark." James chuckled. "What, is there a curfew?" The man didn't laugh. Instead, he mumbled something under his breath before walking away, his pace quickening as if he couldn't leave fast enough. Lisa turned to James. "That was weird." James shrugged, brushing off the unease creeping into his chest. But they should have listened. 2. The first night. Their first day was uneventful. They unpacked, explored the land, and sat on the porch watching the sunset. The silence was soothing, a welcome change from city life. That night, as they lay in bed, the tapping started. Lisa stirred beside him. "Do you hear that?" James sat up, listening. It came from the window. James grabbed a flashlight, pulled back the curtain, and nothing. Just the forest, dark and endless. He sighed. "Probably just a tree branch." Lisa rolled over. Or a raccoon. They went back to sleep. At 3:12 a.m., James woke up freezing. The room was ice cold, his breath visible in the air. Lisa was sound asleep, but something felt off. A presence, a weight in the room that shouldn't have been there. Then tap, 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 slow, rhythmic, purposeful. This time, it wasn't from the window, it was from inside the house. 3. Something is watching. The next morning, James checked the locks. Everything was secure, no signs of forced entry. Lisa made coffee, yawning. "I barely slept. I had weird dreams." James sipped his coffee. "What kind of dreams?" Lisa frowned. "I don't know. I just remember a face." She shuddered. "It was watching me." James hesitated before telling her about the tapping. He didn't want to freak her out. By afternoon, they convinced themselves it was just paranoia. A new house, unfamiliar noises. It made sense. But that evening, things escalated. Lisa was brushing her hair in the bedroom when she froze. James, in the hallway, saw her stiffen. "Lisa?" She didn't answer. She was staring at the mirror, pale as death. James rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" Lisa pointed. The mirror wasn't reflecting them properly. Their movements were off, delayed, as if the reflection was watching before it reacted. James' stomach twisted. He grabbed Lisa's hand, pulling her away. "We're tired. Let's get some rest." Lisa nodded, but she kept glancing back at the mirror. That night, they locked the bedroom door. It didn't help. 4. The whispering in the walls. At 2:44 a.m., Lisa bolted upright, gasping. James woke instantly. What is it?" Lisa was shaking. Someone was whispering. James listened. The house was silent. But then deep within the walls, a voice. Muffled. Too distant to make out words, but close enough to hear its tone. A low, humming whisper. Lisa gripped his arm. "James, what the hell is that?" James forced himself to sound calm. "It's pipes. Maybe the wind." Lisa looked at him, eyes wide. She didn't believe him. Neither did he. The whispering grew louder. James leapt out of bed and flicked on the lights. The whispering stopped immediately, but the feeling of being watched, that never left. 5. The figure in the trees. By the third day, Lisa refused to be alone. James tried to rationalize everything. Old houses made noise, mirrors warped over time, sleep deprivation caused paranoia. But then that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they saw it. Lisa was washing dishes when she dropped a plate. It shattered. James ran in. "What happened?" Lisa pointed toward the woods. A figure, tall, thin, not moving, just standing there, watching. James' skin crawled. "A neighbor?" Lisa shook her head. "They'd have to be 7 feet tall." James grabbed his flashlight, stepped onto the porch, and aimed the beam into the trees. Nothing. But the air had changed. The woods felt heavier. Wrong. Lisa pulled him inside. "James, lock the doors." He didn't argue. That night, neither of them slept. 6. The knock at midnight. The house was suffocatingly silent. Then, a knock, slow, rhythmic, coming from the back door. James' stomach clenched. Lisa grabbed his arm, whispering, "Don't answer it." The knocking continued. Lisa shook her head. "James, do not open that door." He hesitated. Then the voice came, low, whispering, calling his name. Lisa clamped a hand over her mouth. The voice mimicked his own. "James, open the door." James's hands trembled. He stepped back. Then the whispering stopped. Lisa sobbed. "We have to leave." James nodded. They weren't staying another night. 7. The truth about Blackwood Hollow. By sunrise, they packed their things and drove to the nearest town. At a small diner, James asked an elderly waitress about their house. Her face paled. "You bought the Miller house?" James nodded slowly. "What do you know about it?" The waitress hesitated, then lowered her voice. "The Millers were the last to live there. 1936. They were taken." Lisa's breath hitched. Taken by what? The woman's hands shook as she poured coffee. "They called it the Watcher. Lived in the woods. They said it could mimic voices. Said if you looked into its eyes, it pulled you in." James and Lisa stared in horror. The waitress leaned in. "No one who's seen it up close has ever come back," Lisa whispered. "We need to leave. Now." James didn't argue. They drove straight out of Blackwood Hollow. As they left the town behind, Lisa exhaled shakily. Then, James's phone buzzed. A notification. Lisa glanced at the screen. "Who's calling?" James turned pale, because the screen didn't show a number. It showed a voice recording. From the middle of the night, Lisa pressed play. A whisper filled the car. James opened the door. The house that remembered one. The new beginning. Alex and Rachel had been searching for the perfect house for months when they stumbled upon Rosewood Manor. It was old, elegant, and suspiciously affordable. A Victorian-era home with high ceilings, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch that overlooked an overgrown garden. "This is it," Rachel had whispered as she stepped inside. "It feels right." Alex wasn't so sure. The house was too quiet, too still, as if it had been waiting. The real estate agent, an older woman with a tight smile, handed them the keys. "Congratulations," she said. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Just don't go in the basement." Rachel laughed. "Is that supposed to scare us?" The agent forced a smile. "Just a precaution." They should have listened. 2. The unsettling atmosphere. From the very first night, something felt off. The air inside was heavier than it should have been. The floors creaked, but not from settling wood. It sounded deliberate, like footsteps. Rachel woke up that night to whispering. Soft, indistinct. At first she thought it was Alex, mumbling in his sleep, but when she turned, he was awake too. They lay there in silence, listening. The whispers were coming from inside the walls. Alex sat up. "Maybe the house has bad insulation." Rachel, staring at the darkened hallway, whispered, "Or maybe we're not alone." The whispering stopped, but the feeling of being watched never left. Number 3. The woman in the window. The second week, Rachel saw her. It was late evening, and she was tending to the overgrown garden, pulling weeds from between the broken stone path. Then she glanced up toward the second-floor window. A woman stood there, pale, dressed in black with hollowed-out eyes. Rachel gasped, stumbling back. By the time Alex rushed outside, the woman was gone. "There was someone in the house," Rachel insisted. They searched every room, every closet, every shadowed corner. No one. Alex tried to reassure her. Maybe it was a trick of the light? Rachel wasn't convinced, because later that night she saw the woman again. This time, in the mirror behind her. 4. The basement door. The next morning, Alex found Rachel standing by the basement door. She was staring at it, unmoving. When he touched her shoulder, she flinched. "I had a dream last night," she murmured. "About the basement." Alex frowned. "You know the agent said not to go down there." Rachel's eyes remained fixed on the door. "There's something down there." Alex didn't believe in ghosts, but Rachel's fear was real. So that night, he waited until she was asleep, then took a flashlight and went down alone. The wooden stairs groaned beneath his weight. The air was thick with dust, thick with something else. The deeper he went, the colder it became. At the bottom, he shined the flashlight around. There were chains embedded in the walls, and handprints on the stone floor. Small handprints. Then he saw the scratches, deep gouges in the stone, as if someone had been trying to claw their way out. A whisper brushed against his ear. "Why did you come back?" Alex ran. But 5. The house remembers. The next morning, Rachel found him pale and shaking. "There was something in the basement," Alex admitted. Rachel's face turned white. "I saw her again," she whispered. She was closer this time. That night, neither of them slept. And when Rachel woke up at 3:33 a.m., she saw something horrifying. Alex was standing by the window. But when she turned to look, Alex was still in bed. Her breath caught. The thing by the window slowly turned. It had Alex's face, but its mouth was too wide, its eyes too dark. Then it whispered, "You need to leave," and it smiled. 6. The history of Rosewood Manor. They fled the next morning. At the town library, Rachel dug through old records. She found a newspaper article from 1893, Tragedy at Rosewood Manor. A woman, Margaret Hale, had been locked in the basement by her husband for years. Neighbors only discovered the truth after she starved to death. Rachel's hands trembled as she read. The townspeople say the house still remembers her, that her spirit lingers, searching for someone to take her place. Rachel turned to Alex. She was warning us. Alex's face was pale, or she was trying to trade places with you. They never went back. But months later, Rachel got an email from the real estate agency. The house had been sold again. The new owners, a couple, just like them. And attached to the email, a photo. The new couple smiling on the porch and a woman in the window behind them, smiling, waiting. The lost child of Blackwood Lake. One arrival at the lake house. The lake was still, too still. Nathan Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he drove up the dirt road leading to his family's old lake house. The cabin had been abandoned for nearly 20 years, ever since his uncle, who had once owned the place, had mysteriously vanished. No note, no sign of a struggle, just gone. His parents had warned him against going. They said something wasn't right about the house, that it should have been left alone. But Nathan needed an escape from the chaos of the city. And what better place to clear his mind than a secluded retreat surrounded by nothing but water and towering pines. As he pulled into the driveway, the house loomed before him. Faded paint, broken porch steps, a single window on the second floor cracked open, though he could have sworn he'd left them all shut when he arrived. Nathan exhaled. Just the wind, or so he told himself. Number 2, the first night. The lake house was in worse shape than he remembered. Dust coated every surface, the air smelled damp, thick with the scent of rotting wood and something else, something sour. He spent most of the evening cleaning, dusting off old furniture, sweeping cobwebs and unpacking his bags. By the time he was done, the sun had dipped below the tree line, casting the world in darkness. That was when he heard it. A child's laughter. Nathan froze. The lake house was miles away from any other cabin. There were no children here. He stepped onto the porch, his heart pounding as he scanned the tree line. The lake stretched out before him, its surface unnervingly still. The moon reflected against the water like a polished mirror. Silence. Maybe he had imagined it. Then, a splash. Nathan's stomach knotted. He aimed his flashlight at the lake, expecting to see a fish or maybe a fallen branch. Instead, he saw ripples. Something or someone had been in the water. A sudden chill crept up his spine. He locked the doors that night. 3. The woman in the water. The next morning, Nathan shook off the eerie events from the night before. He blamed it on exhaustion, on his overactive imagination. Deciding to enjoy the lake, he grabbed his fishing pole and rowed out on a small boat. The air was thick with fog. As he cast his line, he caught movement on the shore. A woman. She stood at the water's edge, barefoot, wearing a white dress, her head tilted slightly, her long black hair dripping wet. Nathan's blood ran cold. "Hello?" he called out. She didn't respond. She just stared. Then, without warning, she stepped into the lake. Nathan's breath hitched. She walked forward, the water rising past her knees, then her waist, then her chest, then her neck. She never stopped, never hesitated, until she vanished beneath the surface. Nathan rowed to shore as fast as he could. He leapt onto the dock, panting, searching for any trace of the woman. There was nothing. No bubbles, no splashing, no body. Just the lake. Still. Watching. 4. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. The memory of the woman in the water clung to him. The way she had moved, the emptiness in her gaze, it was all too real. At 3:12 a.m., something woke him. A voice, a child's whisper. He's still in the water. Nathan bolted upright, his breath coming in sharp gasps. His bedroom was empty. The whisper had come from inside the house. Number 5, the basement door. Nathan barely slept after that. In the morning, he made a decision. He had to leave. But as he gathered his things, he noticed something strange. The basement door, which had always been locked, was open. A dark staircase led downward, the smell of damp earth and mildew wafting up. Nathan hesitated. He had never been down there. His uncle had always warned him as a child to stay away from the basement. But now, the door was open, and he could hear something, a faint, wet dripping. Against his better judgment, Nathan stepped down. The air grew colder with every step. At the bottom, his flashlight flickered, illuminating a rotting wooden floor. The walls were made of stone, old and crumbling. Then he saw it. A small wooden chest sat in the corner. The lock had rusted over, but the wood was splintered, as if someone or something had tried to claw it open. Nathan's hands trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside was a child's skeleton, dressed in waterlogged clothes. The bones twisted unnaturally, as if the child had died in pain. Then, footsteps behind him. Nathan spun around, his flashlight shaking. Standing at the top of the basement stairs was the woman. Her face was pale, sunken, her black hair dripping with lake water. But now, Nathan saw her eyes, and they were filled with rage. 6. The truth of Blackwood Lake. Nathan stumbled back, his mind racing. The woman stepped forward, her wet footprints staining the wooden stairs. Who are you? Nathan gasped. The woman raised a trembling hand, pointing to the skeleton in the chest. A whisper filled the basement, coming from nowhere and everywhere. He was mine. Nathan's breath hitched, his uncle's disappearance, the cheap price of the house, the lake's silence. It all made sense now. His uncle had killed the child, and the woman in the lake, she had been searching for him ever since. But now, she had found Nathan, and she wouldn't let him leave. 7. The drowning. Nathan ran. Up the stairs, through the living room, toward the door. But when he reached for the handle, the door wouldn't open. A cold, wet hand clamped onto his wrist. Nathan screamed. The woman was behind him now, her grip like ice, pulling him backward. Come back to the water. Nathan fought, kicking, thrashing, but the house had other plans. The floorboards gave way, and suddenly, he was falling. 8. The last ripples. The next morning, the lake was still. The cabin stood quiet and empty. Nathan Carter was gone. No trace of him was ever found, except for wet footprints leading from the basement to the dock. And if you stand at the edge of Blackwood Lake at dusk, you might hear a whisper on the wind. He's still in the water,